We come to clean up the people's garbage. That is our business.
This is the Solid Waste and Environmental Education Program, SWEEP.
The whole of Nevis. A nation's health is a nation's wealth. Solid Waste needs your help, so come and join me.
Good evening, viewers, and welcome to another edition of SWEEP. This program is hosted by the Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority and is brought to you on a weekly basis and gives you updates and information pertinent to refuse disposal on the island of Nevis. This evening, I have a very distinguished panel in my company. On my immediate right is Mr. Andrew Hendrickson, the General Manager of the Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority. To my left, our legal experts, of course. As per usual, you know the lovely Midge Morton and Marisha Robinson are here. And I want to say good evening to everyone. Good evening.
Good evening, Curtis, and good evening to the good listeners of this program.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone.
Now, Andrew, let's start with you because I believe in terms of what's going on with the coronavirus, they claim that it's all about sneezing, coughing, hands not being washed properly, general hygienic practices not being used as a habit that may be causing the main problem. The workers on the truck, the loaders, maybe even the chauffeur, they seem to me to be very much at risk. What is the Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority doing to help these individuals to be safe?
Well, that's a very good question. In collaboration with the Health Department, we've been in contact with the Permanent Secretary, and we are actively arranging for our staff to, especially the collectors, to receive first-hand training as to some of the safety measures that they could take, the precautions they could take when they're handling the garbage. Also, we're in the process of, I don't know if you're aware, but every yacht that docks at our port, there is refuse coming from there. And we're about to put some colored bins, a different color bin there for them to use, just so our loaders could know, well, this is from a yacht. We're trying to differentiate. Additionally, we've issued standard safety equipment to the guys. If you look directly to your left behind there on the table, we have 3 types of respirators, and these were issued practically over 2 years ago to our loaders. If members of the general public have not seen these in use, it's because they are not using them. These are industrial respirators. These are not cheap. They go for like 25 US a piece. The reflective, our reflective vests, again, the workers are displaying a tendency to be a reluctance. They don't want to wear them for some reason. And we have these fancy gloves, which gives proper grip. Now, at first, they were using just garden gloves, but we stepped up the game. These cost roughly 15 US a piece, and we have an abundance of all these at our main office, and we hand them out regularly to the loaders upon request.
In terms of monitoring, though, you did say if you don't see them using them, it won't be the fault, of course, of the authority. But has there been any monitoring done, any specific training done, and any emphasis being placed, especially since this outbreak?
Well, especially since the outbreak, and more specifically, since we got our new board in the latter part of 2019, there has been some enforcement, more rigid and stringent enforcement on the workers to make sure that they are wearing the gear, they're utilizing the gear provided to them. We are also in the process of getting uniforms, steel-tip boots, and uniforms specific to our staff so that they can be easily recognized and they're uniformed.
Okay. let's talk to our legal team now. Mitch and Marissa, there seem to be some underlying legal issues pertaining to an outbreak of this kind of pandemic proportions. For instance, I love stories. I remember, I'm trying not to be too specific, but I remember an office, and I remember a professional individual seated behind a desk, and the individual sneezed into a napkin and then threw it under the desk. And this is no made up story, this is what I saw. And then she called the maid, who was in another room, to come and pick it up and throw it in the garbage bin. Now, looking at a situation like that, let's look at some possible legal issues in terms of deliberate contamination by individuals or anything of that nature. Is there anything that we could learn from the legal aspects?
Well, Curtis, as you're aware, this strain of the virus has been recently discovered. Only at the end of last year, 2019, the World Health Organization became aware of it. It had reportedly been in China for a few weeks prior to the learning, and one might say a few weeks is not very long of a time, but it meant that we were on the back foot when the World Health Organization was notified of it. In terms of whether or not there are any laws specifically addressing that particular virus, I doubt, at least in St. Kitts and Nevis, I doubt there are, but there would be in terms of viruses and diseases that could lead to fatalities. Now, I don't have the legislation in front of me, but I know, for instance, if you want to take the AIDS, HIV, AIDS/HIV, for instance, if you know that you have been diagnosed with the HIV and or AIDS condition, and you knowingly have sex with someone so as to pose a risk to their life, then that is a criminal offense. And one could take from that and apply it to any other virus/diseases that can pose a risk to your life in terms of fatalities. And so what you want the viewership to know is that you ought not to. If you feel you have the symptoms, because the information is out there. As a matter of fact, I feel that there's an overload of information out there on the World Wide Web. And you could stay right in your living room. If you've experienced one or two symptoms that is known to be associated with this virus, then the right thing to do is to make a call to the emergency services, get yourself tested to ensure that you have eliminated the risk of this virus, and that if you know you've been diagnosed with it, then you ought to limit contact with persons around you. You ought to be in quarantine. Quarantine basically means that you ought to isolate yourself from other persons so as to lessen the risk of spread of the virus.
Okay.
Oh, also to add, it might be that you don't know that you necessarily have it, but if you've discovered that you've been in close contact with somebody that has now been diagnosed with it, you too must self-isolate for at least 2 weeks to ensure that either you have to check to see whether you have it or you don't have it. So to know that you've been in close contact with somebody or per individuals, or you would have traveled to areas that's highly contaminated, you return home, you are supposed to self-isolate or be in quarantine for at least 14 days. So to go and mix and mingle with other people, that too could spread the virus. And here is a very small place. It would just spread quickly here, and we have to limit that as much as we can.
You mentioned the 14 days. Just for the benefit of the viewership, the significance of the 14 days is the period in which the virus can truly incubate. Okay. All right. Now, let's look at another aspect because, Andrew, whether or not we want to accept it, everything is practically dumped on the Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority. It's like people generate garbage and the final disposal rests with the Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority. So all of the hand washing and all of the napkins, the millions of napkins that have been used now for the last, like somebody was telling me the other day, is the most they've ever washed their hands. And then there was another person who said, I don't even recommend the hand sanitizer because with the hand sanitizer, you're virtually rubbing your hand and rubbing the virus back into your hand. With the washing, with the soap and the running water, it washes it off your hand. And so people getting technical and so on. And so you use the napkin, you dry your hands, it ends up in a bin. Who has to dispose of it? The Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority. So it's not only just the loaders, it's not only just the chauffeur, it ends up at the landfill. So even the folks at the landfill, Andrew, I think a lot of pressure is there on the Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority to manage this virus somehow.
Yes, Curtis. But I humbly ask you, which landfill?
Okay.
And I say which landfill because it comes to mind that we have so many cases of illegal dumping. And so when you say that we are the last stop at the Nevis Solid Waste Loground landfill, that is not necessarily the case. That's an assumption because a lot of it is being dumped all over Nevis, in the guts, in the byways, the pastures, and everything like that. And so therein lies the problem. We need definitely to stamp down on illegal dumping, especially.
No.
Yes.
Well, ladies, look at this. Here's where the law comes into full force. I just assumed that it would end up at the landfill. I'm corrected. Your thoughts now with all this illegal dumping?
Well, Curtis, you don't have to stand corrected in the sense that Andrew responded to your question about the landfill. There really is only one landfill in Nevis. And so if people are choosing to create another one without the requisite licenses and going through government, then we know what would happen with respect to that. There have been cases where you find people's names on utility bills, and, if you can't properly defend yourself with respect to why a utility bill with your name, you live in Rollins and it ended up somewhere over Bath.
Exactly.
What presumption is one likely to come to?
Okay.
Agreed. But I'd like to bring up, now we don't currently have, according to the officials, we don't have any confirmed cases. Now, some persons are of the view that it's only a matter of time before it comes here. Now, if it does come here, then the waste management will be directed at medical waste management. And that is something that is going to be because we have to think about disposal of needles, gauzes, gloves, gowns, those things. So that is, I think that's why in China they immediately erected a whole new hospital just to,
In a couple of days?
yes, in their efforts to contain the spread of the virus. As you know, it's highly contagious. So I put it to you, Andrew, in terms of if it does or when it does come here, I hope you have the measures in place in terms of medical waste management.
Wouldn't this be the right time for an incinerator?
Well, yeah. Well, there is an incinerator which is being utilized for our medical waste.
Okay.
All the medical waste, ideally, should be headed towards the University of the Americas to be incinerated there. Yes, yes. So that is where our medical waste would be disposed and incinerated. It is a practice, even as we speak.
There's also the aspect of hotel workers what would be your recommendations to hotel workers? Because they not only have to deal with waste management on the hotel property and so on, but if you were to give some advice to a hotel worker who is looking on, because the hotels are still open, what would be your advice, ladies? And define that term for me. It's a big term nowadays, social distancing.
It's gonna be very difficult, especially being it's tourism. It's all about customer service and being as friendly and right. So I know apparently, I'm gonna give this example. I noted a Facebook post from uh, a small, I suppose it's a small business owner down on Penny's Beach. She made a post that she does craft items and she has her stall on the beach geared towards, of course, tourists. So tourists came off the ship, they came up. She had, in the wake of the whole coronavirus, not knowing who is who, where people have been, she put up a hand sanitizer on the stall as well as a sign, and she asked politely that the before they touch the items that they use it. She said, like, of the maybe 100 that passed through, maybe only one person or two persons yielded to her request. Some of them laughed in her face. Some of them, they're like, what you talking about? They took offense to it. That so in terms of for the hotel workers, when you're accustomed, say, a repeat guest visitor who comes and they're accustomed to giving you a hug or whatnot, and this person might not be, one of those believers of some, we do have a lot of skeptics. Some people still think it's not a real thing. And they may want a hug. How does a hotel worker deal with that? Not even that is recommended. But I would say that it may not look nice, but I see where certain business places, they've had their workers, employees constantly, they wear gloves, they constantly sanitize the area. So like the bar area or common areas where the tourists will be, I suppose they will have to constantly sanitize the area. And as they say, once you constantly sanitize, you constantly wash your hands, you avoid touching your face, then it doesn't spread as easily. And when you get home, instead of as soon as you get home, it's recommended that you take off all your clothes and you get clean and put on new clothes before you mingle with family members or whatnot.
The thing about it, Curtis.
Define whether legally or otherwise social distancing.
Social distancing is just a way to describe how you interact, and this thing about personal space, respecting people's personal space, staying 3 to 6 feet away from another individual. Apparently, it can go 6 feet. Yes, that is what some reports are saying. And as a matter of fact, though, we shouldn't even be talking about this in the context of corona. Why would you sneeze and not cover it? Exactly. This is something that has been taught to us from we were very young. And so now corona is now circulating. Then it should come as a natural thing for us to cover our sneeze, cover our cough, what have you, so that we don't expose our neighbors. It's like the case of Donahue and Stevenson. It's something that every lawyer learns in school. Who is your neighbor? And what must you do to take certain steps to ensure that your neighbor is protected from anything you might do intentionally or not unintentionally. So with respect to going back to the persons employed in the tourism industry, I think it's something that, first of all, their employers need to take a look at and to protect their own workers and to protect the integrity of their business and to protect the integrity of our country as a whole. if it is a case where we have to lay off workers temporarily until this thing has quelled, then it might be something that the ministry needs to look into, because it's not only going to affect the staff, but think about their family members that they go back home to, and even the tourists. When you interact with the staff, if, for instance, one staff member has been exposed, then it's a multiplying effect. It's a domino effect. It goes from one to the next to the next.
Well, interestingly, I could update you on this. The very popular Thursday night buffet dinner at Nisbet's has been postponed indefinitely.
That's good. And that Yachtsman Grill, they've closed. They're not open for dining. It's only takeout only. And I think that's a proactive measure in terms of protecting, their employees. Which is that's you have to protect. Yes, they're still working, but you just call in, order what you need, and you take it away. And we need to do that as much as it seems a bit drastic for some people. They're like, oh my gosh, But if we have to do it for a small period of time to protect our country, then why not?
Andrew. The big one is still on. Up to this morning, it has not been changed. Inter-primary 2020. You always are very much involved in the refuse disposal on that big day. What are the plans for this year? I mean, like I said, up to this point, still on. The plans from the Nevis Solid Waste Management perspective.
Well, basically, there's not much tweaking to be done. We've increased the number of bins. I think we carried about 8 more bins over there, and we're making sure that they all have covers. But in terms of how the waste would be disposed during the meet, how it is handled, the Navy Solid Waste Management Authority really doesn't have too much control over that. It would be up to the organizers of the meet to ensure that they have their plastic bags designated in certain areas where people would, and hope that people would throw their napkins and their disposable utensils inside as opposed to on the floor, on the ground. And we've grown accustomed to have sport meet being organized and fully functional all year round over there, of various sorts. And nobody ever had a problem with one fly. Okay. However, when inter-primary is coming around, everybody get into a frenzy, and we start to get these letters from various departments, make sure no flies are up there. But if you stay in the Cherry Gardens area, or Montpelier, anywhere overlooking our landfill cell, and as a matter of fact, the landfill cell is growing so much that it's overlooking most of Nevis anyhow. But when you look up there, you would realize that we have better than 99% coverage. Okay. We are spending a ton of money to make sure that our coverage is very adequate.
And on a daily basis.
On a daily basis. To quell the risk of fire, and 2, to keep the fly population down. And I think we are being very successful in that regard.
Okay. Ladies, especially you, Mitch, on the 1st of April, which significantly is All Fools Day, there's a certain young athlete representing Maud Cross Prep who might be taking a couple of goals. Your advice to the athletes on that big day and the spectators?
Well, both athletes and spectators need to continue exercising caution in terms of respecting people's personal spaces. I know it might be difficult because it's one of the biggest events in Nevis, and it's a lot of children. Everybody comes out to it. You have to, if you know you have a cough, a sneeze, whatever, you have to ensure that you cover. If you insist on going, then you cover your cough and sneeze, and it should be a reflective thing.
It's also being aired live too,
It is.
Yes,
It
so
is being, yes. And that is the best advice at first, to stay home. But if you find yourself over there and discover that you now develop a cough or sneeze, then you protect yourself and protect your neighbors. You know, it's as simple as that.
I
Now,
wanted
Marisha,
to.
I know you're going to support that at least.
Of course, from day one. Now, I just to support what Andrew was saying about the flies. It has been brought up on the program before, and really and truly, flies don't just go where if it's clean or they don't have anything to pitch on. Now, based on what your colleague would have stated, is that the vendors, when you serve your food, and if you don't provide people who are eating at the event, chicken, fried fish, whatever food you're eating, if it is not disposed of in the appropriate manner, a fly will come around. The flies will come around. So it has nothing to do necessarily with solid waste. It has nothing to do with the landfill being there. If the flies have nothing to be attracted to, they will stay where they are. They will stay home. So if it is that you invite them over there, they're going to come.
That is what Rudy said. They will stay home.
You know, check it out carefully. You ladies, you fry fish. There's something amazing about frying fish. I don't know why flies, you start to fry fish and flies just start to come around.
Exactly.
You know,
If you're eating fish on the outdoors, it's something.
there's
that
something
you have.
about it.
Yeah.
And yet still, you know, somebody said something that was remarkable. Y'all have attended the Handless Road Fishers Day thing. You have ever gone to the competition? Indian Castle? Well, I have to check it again. But somebody made a comment and said, have you ever seen a fly close to the beach? Oh. And you know, I said, but all these fish and I've never seen flies close to the beach. Now, where is that? I don't have a clue.
The seawater.
Okay. But you said they will stay home, right?
Yes. Yeah, just to follow up on something Midge said, or what came out of what she said. I would hate to think of having interprimary and most of the people stay home and look at it online or on television. Remember, the magic of that sport is about the atmosphere, the crowd, the interaction, everybody being a close. As a matter of fact, I happen to feel, for that reason, it was a lot cozier at the El Comido Willett Park. But since so much space is over there, the numbers don't really show up itself. Yeah, but what made that sport particularly popular and famous is because of the crowd that it attracted. Yes. So
I know, Andrew, what about? I don't know if it's possible, but I know in some places now they've been installing water stands for people to wash their hands if they need to. So perhaps, I don't know if that's something that is feasible right now, if it is that the event is going to go on, as well as the placement of hand sanitizers at the entrance. So as soon as, once people are going in, they sanitize themselves, as well as have hand washing stands. Yes.
Okay, you just said something, and out of misfortune comes opportunity.
Yes.
And maybe this is a good business opportunity for somebody to start renting these portable hand sanitizing stations where you can wash your hand and they come and they replenish your water and stuff like that. Somebody may get an idea out of that.
Okay. I was very puzzled as to the reason why all of the toilet paper was being bought off, right? But then I found out that one of the signs of this disease is diarrhea. And I was saying,
that's one of the minor ones.
but apparently the people are buying as if to say, well, I'm gonna get it, so let me have a lot of toilet paper.
Well, Curtis, on that point, on the buying, I think we have not touched this during the program, but I think it's important that we speak to the merchants out there. A lot of them are engaging in hiking a price called price gouging, and that is something that is illegal. And it is we hope to discourage it. We hope that people are not doing it, and that if it is being said, it is merely a rumor.
My other theory with the toilet paper story is this. You know, in other places, they've closed schools, they've closed, people are encouraged to stay home, work from home. People have gone crazy buying lots of food. So, you know, people are going to be pigging out. So, what happened? Come out, exactly.
Well, as we wrap up, right, I'm going to pass the mic for our final comments. But if I can dare say, the latest news is that there's one good thing coming out of this corona thing. Have you all heard the news? No. The news is that due to the fact that the coronavirus is now pandemic, that the hurricane season has been postponed for this year. And Jackson, your final thoughts.
Yes, I would just encourage the general public to tighten up on their method of disposal. Make sure that you're not putting loose garbage into the bins so that it can flow, please. And protect them from the animals as much as possible. Keep food out of your waste, and so the animals would not be encouraged so much by the scent of the food. And I wish everybody all the best as we try to cope with this pandemic. And I hope that we'll be over it very shortly before the whole world shut down.
Brilliant.
Right. So I want to pick back up where I left off on the legal aspect of how one must act to ensure that they protect themselves, and not only protect themselves, but protect their neighbors. You must avoid putting yourself in a situation where your risk is exposed. And if, for instance, you insist on going over to the Mondo track, you should limit personal contact as much as possible. Remember, we live on a small island, and it takes nothing for all of us to be affected. If America, who has millions and millions of people in terms of their population size, even Italy is being affected the way it's affected, and they have greater healthcare facilities than we do. So we need to take example from what is happening in the bigger world and ensure that we protect ourselves and our neighbors.
Well, as I always say, cleanliness is next to godliness, and basically this is what this virus is about. It's about keeping clean, being safe. So you just continue, Caribbean, I know, growing up as a Caribbean person, we are always accustomed, when you go home, the first thing I know, usually you have to take off your uniform, change into something. My grandmother, I could never sit on the bed if I've been outside. Those things, I know that it's something that is throughout the Caribbean. Let's continue to engage those practices. Remember that we have a lot of elderly citizens and residents, and they are the most vulnerable. Children being the carriers, and children are the ones that usually stay home with the grandparents. So we have to make sure that the children are always clean, encourage them to constantly wash their hands, keep, dispose of their garbage properly, and let us all just be mindful of everybody else. You never know who has a pre-existing health condition. Let us just be as clean and safe as we can be.
Well, folks, I couldn't have put it any better, and certainly I think the panel delivered well this evening in terms of giving such advice, wonderful advice, and I sincerely hope that we'll take the advice, put it into practice. It's basic hygiene. I mean, if there's a sneeze coming on, you don't have your napkin handy, the flex of your elbow, those little things, washing your hands thoroughly with running water and soap. I mean, those are basic guidelines that we learned from way back when. And so these are little things that could help to save lives and to save our country from shutting down. I'm Curtis Morton on behalf of the legal team and on behalf of Mr. Hendrickson. I want to wish you a safe and wonderful evening. And as per usual, I want to finish with my usual admonition that behind every bit of litter, there is a face. make sure that that face is definitely not yours. Have a wonderful evening.
We come to clean up the people's garbage. That is our business.
This is the Solid Waste and Environmental Education Program, SWEEP.
The whole of Nevis. A nation's health is a nation's wealth. Solid Waste needs your help, so come and join me.